This video is documenting the prediction that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on October 31st, 2025, and then die from his head injury on November 5th, 2025. The date that this video is posted on the social media platform you are watching this on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. Welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall on October 31st, 2025, and severely injure his head, and then he will die from his head injury, as predicted, on November 5th, 2025. So this prediction is being made ahead of time. This email confirms this. As you can see, it was written on October 16th, 2 days before today's date, the date of this recording. Okay, we can see October 16th in the timestamp here for this email. Now this email is some things that I wrote regarding how this prediction is known ahead of time. So not only will the post date of the video prove this prediction is being made ahead of time, and also the timestamp of the email and the forensic notes PDF document prove that this prediction is being made ahead of time, so does the reasons for how this prediction is known ahead of time. Because as you will see, the reasons could not have been concocted in the imagination of a human being. And no one in their right mind, furthermore, would make a video for every day of the year predicting that Paul Simon will fall and die in the hopes that eventually it comes to pass. Not only is Paul Simon only 84, in other words, he could live 10 more years, but also I'm predicting that he will slip and fall, which is more than simply predicting an old person's death. But even if I was only predicting his death, the crazy person is the person who thinks that I would, or anyone would, make a video for every day of the year in the hopes that someday he might die and then the prediction would come to pass. But to do that is one thing, but to also include these reasons, these profound, clear, relevant reasons that I will explain. That's impossible. So the person that believes that such a thing would be done by someone is Looney Tunes. Okay, but that's the nature of the human being. Human beings aren't rational creatures. They are by nature irrational. But this is extremely irrational. To hold on to, and that especially applies to people when they are compelled to look at their worldview, or rather I should say, when people are confronted with information that contradicts their worldview, there is a psychological phenomenon that's referred to in psychology as being belief perseverance. And so in other words, the way the psyche is designed is it's designed to protect one's worldview, even when confronted with information that contradicts it, because it's threatening. It's threatening for the main reason it is threatening is that this people belong to a tribe, and our worldview is often, evolutionary psychology shows that 90% of the time, a person's worldview is not based on pursuit of truth, but on affiliation with the particular tribe that they belong to. And so changing one's worldview is threatening their survival in terms of evolutionary psychology, because it risks having them be ostracized from their tribe. And so that's why in psychology there is a phenomenon, I don't know the name of it, but it's describing how people are either in two camps. 90% of people are what are called soldiers, and 10% of people are what are called scouts. The soldier is interested in defending their worldview. They go to war. They go to battle. There's all kinds of English vocabulary that demonstrates this. For example, when you're having a debate, you will say something like, I concede your point. I concede your point. So you're like battling each other. You belong to a particular tribe. You are representing your tribe, and you need to battle it out and prove that your tribe is, your worldview is the best, is the truth. But there's the 10% of people that are scouts, and they are interested in getting the most accurate reading of the landscape possible. They want an accurate map more than they want to be affiliated with a tribe. But being affiliated with a tribe is spiritual also, because it is a form of pride. And in the Bible, pride is the root of sin. And so if one remains with the worldview that they were born into, simply because of their traditions and family and tribe and tribalism, it's a form of pride, and that's preventing them from coming to the truth, which is what life is about, coming to the truth. That's the way God has set this up. So the soldier will need to overcome their innate inclination to affiliate with their tribe and defend their tribal worldview. Now, a worldview is a person's religion. Religions are worldviews. And the agnostic atheist worldview is a religion. And it has its priests. It has the functions of a religion. But it is a religion. It is a worldview. And the core doctrine, the core fundamental belief of this religion is that there may or may not be a God, but it is impossible to know because there is no evidence for God. That is the core belief of this particular religion. And it is incorrect. It is fundamentally flawed. It is a lie. It is a lie from Satan, and it is an egregious lie. Because the truth is there is an overwhelming amount of evidence, including an overwhelming of scientific evidence for an intelligent designer, for example, of the cosmos. It's absurd, actually, to faced with basic things like, for example, the universe having a beginning, in other words, a creation moment, to conclude that there is no God. But that's just scratching the surface. There's actually attempts now by agnostic atheist scientists to explain away the Big Bang, because they know they're in trouble. They've known it for decades, of course. And so they're coming up with absurd things like string theory, and the cosmologists that believe in God, which is 30% of them, are shaking their heads in bewilderment and go, what are you doing? This is crazy stuff. You are now no longer in the scientific realm. You are in the pseudoscience realm, and that's the truth. But they don't know what else to do because they believe that they are intellectually superior and there is no God and there's no evidence for God. It's a lie. Now, why have I gone on for this long about this? I'm making the point that this video will be proof not only of God, but the God of the Bible, the righteous Christian God of the Bible. And therefore, it will disprove all other religions, all other worldviews. including the agnostic atheist worldview, which is probably the most absurd of all of them. And they are all absurd. All of them are absurd. All of them are clearly men trying to sound smart. Like, that's clearly what the Quran is. It's a mishmash of convoluted nonsense that has no coherence to it. It's just put together, contradicting itself all over the place. It is nothing like the Bible at all. And that's the same with Hinduism and the Bhagavad Gita. These are clearly writings from a man trying to sound smart, which isn't the case at all with the Bible. The Bible isn't even like that at all. It's not even like that at all. It's fundamentally a history book. And either the events in the Bible happened or they didn't. It's that clear. Whereas Buddha could have had his enlightenment under the Buddha tree in any other time of history, and it would make no difference to the religion. Same with Muhammad and his vision of supposedly Archangel Gabriel in the cave. It would make no difference had that happened in any other time in history. But that isn't the case with the events of the Bible. They're all necessary that they happened when they happened. Anyway, the reasons that I'll be providing in this video will prove the righteous Christian God of the Bible. And Jesus. The gospel of Jesus. Now, what does that mean? Well, because, you have all kinds of different denominations as well. That's a whole other subject, which I won't get into. Let's get into this video. So this email is documenting the prediction that singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon & Garfunkel will slip and fall on October 31st, 2025, and then die from a head injury on November 5th, 2025. On November 22nd, 1963, John F. Kennedy was shot in the head and died. This is a parallel with Paul Simon, obviously, or this prediction anyway, with Paul Simon dying from a head injury. So John F. Kennedy was shot in the head and died. He was shot in a Ford Lincoln Continental. Infamously, he was in a Ford Lincoln Continental, and everyone knows that. President Abraham Lincoln was shot in the head in Ford Theater. The film footage of the shooting of Kennedy in the head in a Ford Lincoln is the most famous film footage in history, and it was shot by a man named Abraham, as in Abraham Lincoln, who was shot in a Ford theater. The peak in popularity of the Ford Lincoln Continental was the 1960s. Kennedy's assassination was the first of 4 major political assassinations in the 1960s. The Lincoln Continental car was known for its 4 suicide doors, because the doors opened in an unconventional way. The hinges were on the back instead of the front. They were called the suicide doors. And they had 4 of them. And this assassination in the 4 suicide doors car was the first of 4 major political assassinations in the 60s, the decade of the peak of the popularity of the Ford Lincoln Continental. Now, God pairs 9, 23, and 44 to confirm the signs and connections. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9, 23, and 44. And I know these are the numbers that God pairs to confirm the signs because I've been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. The reason being is the 44th president was inaugurated in 2009 and is the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school. Also, the mark of the Antichrist is described as an inverse of it in the 9th chapter of the book of Ezekiel. And the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's 23 chromosomes, which come, 23 pairs of chromosomes. Okay. The first of 4 political assassinations in the car with 4 suicide doors was exactly 2 times 30, which since that's 23 years before a car drove at high speed and in a suicidal manner. And that's all in the stories of this crash. The car was suicidal and crashed into the U.S. Customs at the Rainbow Bridge. The 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for door. The Rainbow Bridge cost $4 million to build. In God's signs, the bridge is the same symbolism as a door. Because the demons will come through the unlocked door, as described in the book of Revelation, and traverse over the bridge from the demonic realm into the earthly realm. So 4 equals door, as does bridge. The bridge cost $4 million to build. And it was 2 times 30 years exactly after Kennedy's head injury in a car with 4 suicide doors. That's a pairing of 23 and 44. The driver and passenger of the car that was driven in a suicidal manner at the bridge that cost $4 million were on their way to a Kiss concert. When the car crashed, it jumped into the air, getting completely airborne. The founder of the band Kiss, Gene Simmons, took his name from Jumpin' Gene Simmons. Jumpin' Gene Simmons was an early rock musician who opened for Elvis Presley concerts and whose only hit was Haunted House. Paul Simon sang about Elvis Presley's house in a song, Graceland. And haunted houses are usually mansions, and Elvis Presley's house was the Graceland mansion. Elvis famously covered Simon's song, Like a Bridge Over Troubled Water. The troubled water here being the Niagara Falls, over which the Rainbow Bridge passes. Elvis died from autoimmune diseases that were a result of a head injury he suffered when he fell and hit his head on a porcelain bathtub in his mansion in Los Angeles, which hints at fallen angels, as in demons that will come or rise out of the bottomless pit. A lot of people don't know this, but many professionals believe that Elvis died from not from drugs, but from his autoimmune diseases that he was taking drugs for, which were a result of his head injury. Simon is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head on Halloween. Haunted houses are associated with Halloween. Okay? So we've tied now the crash to head injuries through the connection to John F. Kennedy and Elvis Presley, because the car was on its way to a Kiss concert, who was founded after Jumpin' Gene Simmons, and the car jumped into the air, Okay, well, it was founded by Gene Simmons, who stole his name from Jumpin' Gene Simmons, who opened for Elvis concerts and was part of Sun Records, and whose only hit song was Haunted House. Because Paul Simon will die from a head injury, he will suffer on Halloween, which is, of course, associated with haunted houses. But there's more to this, actually, because we're talking about fallen angels. Elvis Presley fell in Los Angeles, as in fallen angels. And they are musicians. On the gate to the Graceland Mansion is musical notes. Music is heard through frequencies coming through the air. And in the Bible, it says that Satan is the prince of the power of the air. What is coming is the mass demonic possession, which is hinted at with haunted houses and Halloween, of people's heads, their brains, which will be triggered by frequencies in the air, which will cause them to, which will facilitate or rather engender delta brainwaves, and then they will become demonically possessed because of the delta brainwaves. It facilitates the demonic possession. Studies have been done on this too, by the way, like experiments. This is why the first lyric in the song Graceland of Paul Simon's is, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. Paul Simon famously dated Shelley Duvall, who starred in the movie The Shining. He also infamously broke up with Duvall at the airport, as in portal, as in bridge, as in door through the demonic realm, before she flew to the UK to film The Shining. Airplane, also like music, in the air, prince of the power of the air, from an airport, portal. The movie The Shining is about a mansion. Well, it's about a large hotel, which is symbolism for a mansion, but it's about a demonically possessed mansion. And Jack Nicholson becomes demonically possessed in the movie. And so that's The Shining. It symbolizes demonic possession. Paul Simon says or sings, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. What's coming as judgment on the nation, the national guitar, is the mass demonic possession, the shining of people who take the mark of the Antichrist, which causes autoimmune diseases and puts things inside the brains of these people that will act like transistors to the 5G frequencies that will facilitate delta brainwaves and demonic possession. They might even jump around. But Kiss, the band, is obviously Antichrist, with their demonic-looking characters and their painted faces. The name Gene hints at the genetics of those who take the mark of the Antichrist, which is why they are marked, because their genes have been altered. They've been marked. With what? With snake venom DNA. That's the truth about what the protruding amino acid chain on the CVD disease. You know what I'm talking about. The SPIKE thing. The SPIKE protruding amino acid chain. And that's what was in the things that were put into people that were supposed to commandeer the genetic output of the genes, of the cells. I mean, that is the technology, right? That's why Jumpin' Gene Simmons and the demonic possession that's coming. So you see, all of this connects, right? It's astounding. It took a long time to put all of this together. We're talking like at least 2 years of God's signs to piece this all together. My friend and I. All right. And so that's why Paul Simon will die from a head injury. It'll ultimately point to the coming demonically possessed, the demonic possession through people's heads, through frequencies in the air. That's why Paul Simon is a singer and a musician. Okay, as I said, God pairs 23, 9, and 44. A car on its way to a Kiss concert jumped into the air in a suicidal crash at the bridge that cost $4 million, exactly 20 or 2 times 30 years after Kennedy's head injury in a car known for its 4 suicide doors. The crash of the... Oh, and by the way, prophecy says that these people that get demonically possessed will seek to commit suicide but will be unable to. That's why the connection to the suicide doors and the suicidal car crash on its way to a Kiss concert. The demonically possessed figures on the stage doing music, supposedly music, which is symbolic of frequencies. The crash of the car on its way to a Kiss concert crashed exactly 23 months and 9 days before it is predicted that Paul Simon will fall and injure his head on October 31st, 2025. So there you have it. All of that connects now mathematically through day counts, because you got the 44 from the connection of the first of 4 political assassinations to the crash at the $4 million bridge, and also the 4 suicide doors. That connects then with 2 times 30 years, which then connects with 23 months and 9 days. That's 9, 23, and 44. The building blocks for God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. Now, if you think that I was able to create all of this in my head prior to October 31st, my friend, you need your head checked. Speaking of head injuries. If you think that I made this video after October 31st, you also need your head checked, because it's not possible to change the date of the post of a video. But I also have the proof through the email and the forensic notes PDF document. Okay? So there you have it. And now I will say this. I know far better than anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. And it is to prove the controversial things that I have said. Make no mistake. Everything that I have said is the purpose for why God has given me a voice through this prediction. Please make no mistake. It does not matter if you disagree with the things that I have said. You are incorrect, and that'll be proven when the prediction comes to pass. Case closed. End of debate. No more discussion at all. The thing is the mark of the Antichrist. The vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken it. The Bible does not say that one cannot repent. And there is a coming mass demonic possession. But all this proves the God of the Bible, the righteous Christian God of the Bible. And God hates it when the thing that God hates the most, I'll add this. The thing that God hates the most is mixing the true religion with false religion. The Jews were constantly chastised for this in the Bible, and then they were ultimately exiled for it. Catholicism is a mix of Christianity, the Bible, and false pagan religion, just like the Jews mixed their religion with the pagan religions of their neighbors. I mean, Peter in the Bible called Rome Babylon, and Babylon is the home of pagan religion. Now, if you are a New Ager of some sort, and like to incorporate Christian Christian-esque, Christian-ish ideas into your own personal worldview that includes Eastern philosophy, things like karma and reincarnation, and we are all part of God and we are all God and we need to remember we're God, etc. Wake up, get some clarity, and start to think clearly. The majority of you in this camp are women. And no offense, but by nature, women were not designed to think so clearly. You need a man in your life. You need to take some authority from a source, such as the authority comes from God, the Father, and Jesus, who was a man. And it comes through other men who wrote the Bible. And you need to take it seriously and stop mixing your pagan or New Age or Eastern religion with Christianity, which is a very popular thing to do for many women today who do not want to take the Bible. Ultimately, they do not want it. They think they're Christian, but they're not. They don't read the Bible typically, etc. Okay? And so they think they're all good. We are not good. You're on the way to hell for doing what you're doing, for not taking the Bible seriously, for not taking sin seriously, for not becoming Christian, a true Christian, a regular, normal, true Christian. Not like the Christianity you've made for your own mind. And now on that note, every religion basically has their own interpretation of who Jesus is. But they are not Jesus. And it has nothing to do with Jesus, not the Jesus of the Bible. The true Jesus is the Jesus of the Bible. Muslims will say, oh, well, we appreciate Jesus. We think he was a great guy and he was from God and a prophet, but he wasn't God. Well, this isn't the true Jesus. You believe in a false Jesus. You are not a follower of Jesus. You have nothing to do with Jesus. Please understand. Your Jesus isn't Jesus. Just because you say it is. It's a name. It's 5 letters. Just because you attach 5 letters to your own idea doesn't make it Jesus. That applies also to the New Agers and the Eastern religionists who claim that Jesus was an enlightened master who went to India in his early years and became enlightened and came back and supposedly tried to bring the wisdom of the East to Western culture and did his best to describe it to people, and out came the Bible. That's such a wicked lie. And anyway, your Jesus has nothing to do with the Jesus of the Bible. Please understand. You've made up your own false god. And the thing that God hates the most is the worship of false gods. You have your own God that you've created in your own mind. You have an idol that you are worshiping, and that is the first commandment, the first cardinal sin. No, the first sin. The first commandment. But is the thing that God hates the most in the Bible. Okay, so you have nothing to do with the truth and you have nothing to do with God. Here's another thing. People will claim they have had experiences in their lives that confirm for them that they're all right with God. This isn't true. First of all, you have no idea the power of the demons and Satan. His job is to fool you, and people get the deception they ask for. That's in the Bible, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. It's the only quote I include on my flyer, actually. People get the deception they ask for. So if you are a New Ager and you've had these experiences, or a Catholic, Catholics are constantly having these supernatural experiences that they claim confirms their faith to them, for them. Catholicism as a whole throughout history has been filled with demonic deception and these so-called spiritual experiences that confirm for them their Catholicism. And it's because you've been asking for this, you received the deception you're asking for. It's like people who want to see the UFOs and aliens because they're really curious, see them. They go out into the woods and they see them. But the truth is that the demons find them and give them the deception they ask for. Same with people that do yoga and meditation. The supernatural highs that these people receive is the deception that they're asking for. And I know this from firsthand experience from my early 20s. It is the counterfeit Holy Spirit. It's satanic. Which is why people get addicted to it, because they end up eventually, like drug users, needing more and more of it just to get back to normal. And some people go so far that they eventually reach rock bottom and they finally come to the truth and get saved by Jesus. Anyway, so experience is not what we are told to rely on. Experience is unreliable. But there's also what's called common grace. God can bless people that aren't part of his family. And no one is part of his family until they are adopted. It is incorrect to say that we are all God's children. That's not the Bible. We are not God's children. We are children of Satan until we are saved and rescued from this world, which is ruled by Satan, as the Bible says. And so, there's a difference between common grace and saving grace. God can bless people, and because he loves them, or he wants them to come, he'll give them grace to coax them and encourage them to follow the path of truth and to find him. But it doesn't mean, if you've experienced some form of common grace, it doesn't mean that you are in right standing and you're saved. How does one get saved? One comes to Christ. One receives Christ's Spirit and repents of their sin and follows Jesus' teachings and makes an effort to live out their faith. Now, before I get into doctrine, if you are a Christian, watch the 23 church signs video on this channel. Arguably the most important video for you. All right, the rest of the information presented in this email and video is in notation format. I am copy pasting from my personal notes. This information is presented in the order in which the insights were received. And so the insights build on each other and become more profound as it goes, with more understanding regarding what God is doing here. And I will just simply go through the notes and then speak about the subjects briefly that are notated here. More reasons for how this prediction is known ahead of time. Okay, it's very, very interesting. Stay tuned. So on October 16th, 2025, one of the founders of the band named Kiss, the Kiss band, Ace Frehley, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, died from a head injury he suffered when he fell a few weeks earlier. This is extremely interesting. This is extremely interesting because, as I've just spoken about, God has already connected Kiss to the predicted fall of Paul Simon and his death from a head injury, and how it connected to John F. Kennedy's head injury when he was shot. But here we have this Ace Frehley guy, one of the founders of Kiss, the other founder, if you will, besides Gene Simmons, whom we've already talked about. Okay, so he died, and it's recent. It was just October 16th. We're getting close to the date Paul Simon is going to fall and die from a head injury, and he's a musician. And we have this other famous, well, actually 1970s, like Paul Simon, musician, falling and dying from a head injury. And he didn't die right away. That's another thing that's parallel here, as I'll explain. I'm pretty sure it's coming up. But it's likewise predicted that Paul Simon won't die immediately from his head injury and will die 5 days later on November 5th, after his predicted fall and head injury on October 31st. So at the time that this Ace Frehley guy from the band Kiss died, he was working on his album that he was titling Origins 4. The last time he performed with Kiss was on a ship. The reason why there is an exclamation mark here is because in the month of August, the 8th month of the year, God revealed all of these ship signs regarding or related to Paul Simon because of Revelation chapter 8 and verse 8, Revelation 8:8, and the destruction of ships. And as I explained in prior videos, the destruction of ships in Revelation chapter 8 is symbolism for the destruction of America because of Isaiah chapter 23. Much of the book of Revelation is a parallel with prophecy in the Old Testament, and in this case, the ships in Isaiah chapter 23, the ships of Tarshish, because there's all kinds of evidence that Tarshish in the Bible was Great Britain. And the prophecy speaks of the ships of Tarshish, and Great Britain's power and supremacy over the world and the global empire it once had were a result of its naval power and its ships and its trading with ships. This is the reason why God separated the island of Great Britain from the rest of Europe, to create this unique culture that he would use to spread the gospel around the world and to isolate it from enemies on the mainland and to enable it to be a ship-fearing, sea-fearing people. Faring, I should say. And so in this prophecy, there's also the mention of the daughter of Tarshish, which is America. And so that's why it's amazing with this wisdom, we can appreciate that those that say that America isn't in Bible prophecy are very wrong. And when this prediction comes to pass, it'll prove what I am saying. That's the purpose of the prediction. It's to prove God's big picture of signs. And what I am saying is that there were these profound ship signs related to Paul Simon in the month of August, the 8th month. And I go through them in other videos, but we won't get into it. So anyway, that's a huge signal here that this is prophetic, because this guy's death is also related to Paul Simon, because the last time he performed was on a ship. It was the Kiss Cruise. It was a special ship. Not only was it just a ship, it was a special ship. It was named the Kiss Cruise 2018, which is the annual Kiss concert on a ship, a cruise ship. But this Ace Frehley guy, founder, participated in the Kiss Cruise 2018, which set sail on October 31st. This date that God is saying Paul Simon will slip and fall and die from a head injury. Okay, but it was 2018, so that is, or was, or is, exactly 7 years before October 31st, 2025. And in Bible prophecy, the most central prophecy in the Bible, a 7-year period is symbolic of the end times tribulation and the period of the Antichrist. It is only symbolic, as I've said. The symbolic 7 years, incidentally, began with a Paul Simon sign when the driver of the Ford Lightning model truck drove through the streets of New Orleans on a Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. on the day of the 4 iconic locations, towers, buildings in America being struck by lightning. That's why the Ford Lightning truck. And it was 7 plus 7 people killed. And on that same day, a Tesla exploded in front of Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, in which 7 people were injured. And Trump is, again, symbolic of 3 sets of 7 because of the book of Joshua and the walls of security that collapsed. Well, so anyway, the 4 iconic locations were the Capitol Building, Washington Monument, One World Tower, and Empire State Building, 2 locations in New York and Washington, in parallel with the 2 locations in New York and Washington that were intended to be struck by planes, at least on 9/11, because the 4th one didn't make it. But that 4th one, speaking of 4 lightning strikes. Now, the media spoke about this in the news. The mainstream media talked about this strange coincidence of the 4 lightning strikes in the one evening on New Year's Day, or New Year's morning. Well, anyway, the 4th plane crashed into a 40-acre pit because it crashed at a 40-degree angle, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, and killed 44 people. But anyway, the reason why I went off subject here is because the Lightning model Ford truck struck the people and killed 7 plus 7 people at the beginning of the symbolic 7 years. It's just symbolism, right? It's just the first day of the year. That's all it is. It's not an exact 7 years, like I'm saying. It's only symbolism. But anyway, that strike was on Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. New Orleans is significant to Paul Simon because Paul Simon's song Graceland is a travel down the highway to Memphis, and he would have began his journey from New Orleans as he drove through the, as he said in the song, Mississippi Delta. Okay, well, Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. is the name of Paul Simon's first album, which contains the song Sound of Silence. In Revelation 8:1, it begins this chapter with a sound of silence in heaven. And that's why we had the Paul Simon-related ship signs in the 8th month of the year this year, because of Revelation 8:1 and the sound of silence. Okay, so now, the KISS cruise that this KISS founder participated in was the 4+4th annual KISS cruise. And he died while he was producing his Origins 4 album. The 4 lightning strikes, incidentally, were on the day of the attack with the Ford Lightning truck in the 6+6 state, because the 44th president is the Antichrist. That's why we have this 4+4th annual KISS cruise in which he participated in. And by the way, KISS is obviously Antichrist, right? The figures, the way they put on the makeup and stuff, it's demonic. They dress up as demonic characters. I mean, clearly, right? And anyway, yeah, and he was producing his album Origins 4 at the time. The cruise, this cruise that he was on began on this date 1031, which, by the way, hints at Paul Simon in itself, if I haven't mentioned it before, because Paul Simon was born on the date 1013. So it's an anagram, if you will, of the date of Paul Simon's birth. But the cruise on, and by the way, it's 6+6+6 days after his birthday. Right? By the way, his predicted fall will be 6+6+6 days after his 84th birthday. And the name Obama is equal to 84 in Hebrew gematria. Well, anyway, this KISS cruise in 2018 that this KISS musician was participating in ended on the date 11/5, November 5th. And this is how it was first recognized that the date that Paul Simon will die is predicted to be November 5th. Prior to that, it was not known at all, really, what day Paul Simon might die, because it was believed that he probably wouldn't die on the day that he would fall, based on other signs, including, but it was known prior to this, the this death of this KISS performer who died after, weeks later after he fell from his head injury. Okay, so, and as I wrote here, if by chance the Lord is using this day, that Simon will die on November 5th, and now it's been confirmed. Okay, so that's amazing. God used this KISS performer to point to his last performance on the KISS cruise, which was immediately recognized as being a Simon sign, because, by the way, the ship signs in August this year involved cruise ships. Like, let me think. I think all of them were, no. There wasn't all, it was 90% of them were cruise ships. Let's just put it that way, okay? Not only cruise ships, but Royal Caribbean. Because of royalty symbolism, which hints at Elvis, the king of rock, which is associated with Paul Simon and God's signs. And also the king of rock is symbolism for the king Antichrist. Because of the Bible, the king of Egypt. And Memphis is named after Memphis, Egypt. And it is located in the area of America named Little Egypt. And the king's mansion, Graceland, is symbolism for the king's palace in Egypt. In the Bible, the king of Egypt is symbolism for the Antichrist. Okay. And so is KISS symbolism for the Antichrist. Okay. So Ace Frehley's first name is Paul. Another clue that this hints at Paul Simon. In a 2024 interview with Anti-Hero, I guess there's a magazine named Anti-Hero, Frehley summed up his legacy in his own words. I have to say, almost every guitar player I meet, at least 75%, if not more, say to me, I picked up the guitar because of you. When I heard Alive, that was it. I decided to pick up a guitar and start learning your songs, he said. That's going to be pretty much my legacy, that I was able to make the transition from a supergroup like KISS to being a successful solo artist. Well, there's no humility there. But we have in this hidden anti-hero, which hints at the Antichrist, and we have a transition. Well, arguably, Obama will make a transition to the Antichrist. He is already lowercase a Antichrist. But he will become the Antichrist, I guess, if you will. But the Antichrist will promise immortality through taking the mark of the Antichrist. That's the symbolism contained in Alive, the name of his song, that he says people talk to him about in his guitar playing. So at least he says so anyway. I don't know. He's famous for this guitar playing in the song, his song Alive. But this is all symbolism for the coming end times and the mark of the Antichrist that will promise immortality. But it's also a hint at the truth, because the devil, Satan's strategy, his prerogative is to invert things, to turn the truth upside down. Because the truth is Jesus resurrected. But the Antichrist will also be resurrected. Pope Francis will be resurrected. I believe that date will be April 26th, 2029. Okay, so the date 11/5, this is huge. The date 11/5 hints at 115. This was the date, this was known a long time ago as huge in terms of Paul Simon, because that's the date on which Paul Simon received his prophetic dream, in which a voice instructed him to make his recent album named 7 Psalms. And the voice told him to name it 7 Psalms, which is actually a hint at the 7 trumpets of God's judgment that are described after the sound of silence in heaven. But anyway, the date 115 is because God is using this to point to the book of Amos chapter 1 with its 15 verses, as I explained in other videos. And there's a Hebrew idiom that's repeated in these 15 verses of this first chapter, which is for 3 transgressions and for 4. And the idiom means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been exceeded, and now judgment and destruction are unavoidable. But this idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4 is, for example, the reason why Paul Simon's first album was Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Wednesday morning, or Wednesday is the 4th day of the week. 3 a.m. is the beginning of the 4th watch, night watch in ancient Israel. And the 3 a.m. gives us the 3 and the 4. So for 3 transgressions and for 4. This is in the book of Amos. Simon and Garfunkel's first album, Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., was produced after they were signed by the first agent to sign them, Wally Amos, the founder of famous Amos cookies, which hints at the famous prophet Amos in the Bible. And by the way, Wally Amos lured Simon and Garfunkel into his office through offering them cookies, through gifting them cookies. And then he went on to found the biggest cookie company in history because it's a prophecy from God. And recently he died at the age of 88, by the way, which hints at, well, Amos chapter 8, but also Revelation chapter 8. Why Amos chapter 8? Because Revelation chapter 8:1, like I said, is about the sound of silence, which hints at Paul Simon. Amos 8:1 describes a basket of summer fruit. And these signs in the 8th month, these ship signs, were in August, the time of the year when there are baskets of summer fruit. Okay. The death of the Doomsday Defense player on August 30th, a date that God was pointing to ahead of time as being relevant for Paul Simon. In fact, there were videos made that predicted that Paul Simon would slip and fall on this date, and then we received the relevant prophetic signs related to Paul Simon. But one of them being the conjunction between Venus and the M44 Beehive star cluster, because of the 44th president being the Antichrist. Venus in Bible prophecy is the morning star, which is associated with Lucifer, the Antichrist, symbolism for the one of the names for Satan. Okay, and so that's the reason for this prophetic conjunction. But also God pointed to this date through the Beast Games. The most popular YouTuber had a television show he produced that aired earlier this year called Beast Games. The guy calls himself Mr. Beast, which is an immediate signal to those who are wise that this points to the beast in Bible prophecy, which is a metaphor God's used for the Antichrist. So we have the Doomsday Defense, which was the nickname for the defensive line for the Dallas Cowboys in the 1970s, which incidentally ties to Paul Simon, who was the singer from the 1970s. And I think late 60s too, which incidentally is also Paul Simon. Anyway, the death of the Doomsday Defense player. Oh, and the reason why this date was pointed to through the Beast Games is that the series began with 1,000 contestants, and slowly over the 10 episodes, the contestants were systematically eliminated, and it got down to, in the final episode, 2 final contestants. And coincidentally, their numbers were 830 and 831. Big coincidence that the mainstream media picked up on, in fact. I actually recognized the date 831 before I even knew of the coincidence. All I knew was that the winner was 831. And so I checked for the date 831 and found that God was pointing to it. And then it was months later that I learned that the other final contestant was 830 and that there was this coincidence. So God was pointing to these both of these dates, and one reason being is because the conjunction in the night sky overlapped these 2 dates, 830 and 831. But also on this day was the overlap of the 9/11 mayor sign, Rudy Giuliani, because he got into the accident on the highway in the 9th state on the 30th, and then the news was, this was reported in the news on the following day. First reported on the 31st. And 30, by the way, is the 11th prime number. So that was a 9 and 11. And anyway, so on this day, though, this player died. And now it finally makes sense, as I wrote here, because I was always trying to figure out what's the relevance of his jersey number. Because he wore jersey number 55. And I couldn't figure out why, what's the deal here? I mean, this is the Paul Simon date. This is the sign we received. Doomsday, it's a signal that it's definitely a prophetic sign. Doomsday defense. By the way, I believe this hints at the coming asteroid hit, which Paul Simon's death hints at because of the 7 trumpets that follow the sound of silence in the 8th chapter of Revelation, which God is using Paul Simon to point to. And there'll be, I guess you could say, a defense. Like you have these movies in which astronauts go up into space and try to deflect an asteroid and that sort of thing, right? So there's a doomsday defense. That's one aspect of the name Doomsday Defense here, related to Paul Simon. And furthermore, on this night, we had a sign in the night sky, which was further confirmation that this Doomsday Defense name hints at what I just mentioned, this coming hit of an asteroid that's described in the 8th chapter of Revelation. Well, anyway, so the player wore number 55. Now, this is related to Paul Simon because there's all kinds of 5s with Paul Simon. For example, his name Paul is equal to 50 in gematria, and the name Paul Simon is also equal to 500 in Hebrew gematria. His prophetic concert, his reunion concert with Garfunkel in Central Park was exactly 500 months before the release of his recent prophetic 7 Psalms album. His only #1 hit as a solo artist was 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. He has produced a total of 5 plus 5 plus 5 solo albums, and I believe it's 50 albums altogether. And also in the iconic song that's the most prophetic song of Paul Simon's, In God's Signs, if you will. Well, no, I shouldn't say that, because how can you grade them, really? But because, Sound of Silence. But there's also Graceland. And anyway, Paul Simon speaks of traveling down the highway to Memphis, and that would have been the I-55 highway, which is very prophetic in God's Signs, because it connects New Orleans in the 6 plus 6 plus 6th state to Memphis, the home of the king, as in King Antichrist 666 mansion, which in turn connects with St. Louis and then Chicago, the home of the Antichrist. Also, Satan, the word, is mentioned 55 times in the Bible, as is the word demon. Okay, so you get the idea here. Now, so why 55? Well, it turns out that the date Paul Simon is predicted to die hints at 55 and vice versa, I should say, because 11:5 hints at 11 times 5, which equals 55. So God was saying that that the date of the the death of the Doomsday Defense player was pointing to the date Paul Simon would die. Now, the player played for Dallas, which is a whole other story because God is using Dallas to identify specifically what the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day is, which is taught in the seminaries in Dallas, which churn out the nation's pastors. Pastors are themselves Nicolaitans, but they also preach the Nicolaitan doctrine, sovereign grace, Reformed theology, Calvinism and dispensationalism, etc. And once saved, always saved. And so God really hates this, and I don't want to get into it again because I go into it every other video because it's like the big thing here, right? And make no mistake, I know far better than anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction, and it is to prove what I have just said. There is no debate. It's not a discussion. When the prediction comes to pass, it'll prove, and this is the purpose of the prediction, that the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day has its home in Dallas. And if you are a Christian, arguably the most important video for you on this channel is the 23 church signs video, in which I will discuss more about this sort of thing, this doctrine, etc. And so there's no point for that reason also to keep repeating myself. Okay. Ace was working on Origins 4, but also Dallas' symbolism for the American Evangelical Church, which is the Church of Laodicea, because I believe, and so do others, that the 7 churches are also symbolic of the 7 stages of church history. The last stage being the modern evangelical church, which doesn't only apply to American churches, but also around the world, because America and American Christian culture has spread itself around the world. If you go to any other country today, you will find churches that resemble in many ways and every way American evangelicalism. Well, anyway, the American Evangelical Church is the Church of Laodicea that thinks it is in need of nothing, and of which God, Jesus, is knocking on the door. So many people think that that's a passage talking to unbelievers, but no, it's a passage written to the Laodicea church. It's for believers, and it applies to our time. That's the purpose of the 7 churches, right? It doesn't only apply to those churches in history, but also it's applying to stages of church history. And the Laodicea church is the modern evangelical church that thinks that it is in need of nothing, and God wants to vomit out of his mouth, because they don't realize they are blind, pitiable, and naked, and that Jesus is knocking on the door, which means that Jesus isn't inside this church, and that is harsh. But I understand it. I do understand it. I mean, I could just go on, but let's just sum it up this way, though. Why are they Laodiceans? Because they think they are in need of nothing. Why is that? Well, their doctrine, the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, which Jesus says he hates in the book of Revelation, and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. It is the bad root of the tree that produces the bad fruit of the modern evangelical church. What is their fruit? Well, for one thing, it's a lack of fear of God. And even in most of these churches, the concept of fear of God is even anathema. No, that's an Old Testament thing. Well, no, it isn't. Why would it be? And, well, the doctrine that produces the complacency, that the reason why they think they're in need of nothing, is their Reformed theology and once saved, always saved, and their Calvinism and predestination, etc. They actually believe that God knows ahead of time before people are born whether they will go to hell or heaven. And of course, that's absurd. Well, it's disgusting, really, is what it is. And it also means that people don't have free will. But that's how we are in the image of God. It's through having free will and our choice. Anyway, I'm getting off into doctrine. And so anyway, I'll cover this in the 23 church signs video. So Ace was working on Origins 4, and he was last with KISS on the 4+4th annual KISS cruise that ended on November 5th, 2018. The Coldplay KISS Cam sign, the prophetic sign, okay, was 4 times 4 weeks before November 5th. So what was the Coldplay KISS sign? If you recall, there was the Coldplay concert. That's in itself a hint at Paul Simon, and who is a musician, who incidentally was, I'm pretty sure, no, I am sure, was touring at the same time as Coldplay was touring. This was in the summer, and Paul Simon toured this summer. Okay, and And so what it was, if you don't recall, was during the concert, the cameras in this, panned to a particular couple in the stands watching the concert, and they were making out, they were kissing. It's called the kiss cam. But anyway, once they recognized that they were on the big screen, because that's what it is, the camera goes on to some people in the stands, but everyone else in the whole stadium can see it on the big screen. Once they recognized, they were embarrassed, and they tried to get out of the frame of the camera, which brought attention to them. And it turns out that it was a CEO of a big company named Astronomer, and that's more hint at the coming asteroid. And also, like I said, this conjunction with, and by the way, I forgot to mention, the Beehive cluster is relevant because Paul Simon is known for his appearances on Saturday Night Live, including the first opening of the first broadcast after 9/11. Big deal, very, very important in God's signs. This is how Paul Simon is symbolism for 9/11. But anyway, so there was one skit in which he was in, which involved the killer bees. There was an ongoing skit in the 70s at one point, the killer bees, and he was involved in one of the skits. And so that's why the Beehive cluster. Okay. And so anyway, the death of Kiss, I should say it connects with the Kiss cam because of the fours, because he was on the 4+4th annual Kiss cruise, and the Kiss cam viral video prophetic sign was exactly 4 times 4 weeks before the predicted death of Paul Simon, which I can now tell you God uses the number 4 to symbolize Paul Simon because of what I just explained, for one thing, for 3 transgressions and for 4. So that's why the 4s. This is also the 44th president. All right. Now, the Kiss guitarist who was producing Origins 4 died exactly 3 months after the Coldplay Kiss cam. This, again, hints at for 3 transgressions and for 4. Paul Simon, Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Also, the 8th annual cruise on a ship hints at the ships in Revelation 8, and specifically Revelation 8:8. And the name Ace Frehley is equal to 88 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. So this Ace Frehley guy is the sign, and we are talking about how he was assigned because of the 8th annual Kiss cruise that he participated in, which is at Revelation 8, and specifically the ships in Revelation 8:8. The ship sign and car number 88 sign on the date 8/8 are 88 days in between count to November 5th. Okay? Well, anyway, this was the first of the ship signs in the month of 8, the 8th month, on the date 8/8, which hinted at the ships in Revelation 8:8. And that day, the top of the water slide on the Royal Caribbean cruise ship busted as a man was sliding down the slide, which hinted at Paul Simon's big hit, Slip, Slide, and Away, and Paul Simon's predicted slip and fall in which he will injure his head. On that same day, on the date 8/8, the NASCAR driver of car number 88 won the race, and then in victory lane, as he was celebrating on top of his car, number 88, slipped and fell head first in front of the cameras and broke his collarbone. This driver is known for being only 19 years old, and 19 is the 8th prime number. And that was all on the date 8/8, including his car number 88. And he slipped. So this was amazing, right? So anyway, this date 8/8 is 88 days to Simon's predicted fall. maybe he will fall on the 30th and news will break on the 31st. If he falls on the 30th, that would be 88 days after the date 8/8. As it is, it's 88 days in between count, which God can use if necessary. The first of the cruise ship's signs on 8/8 was 1,656 hours before October 16th, when Ace Frehley died. Okay, so that's interesting because this number of hours is symbolic of the flood judgment in the Bible, because the flood began 1,656 years, according to the genealogy, after Adam. Now, I don't personally believe it's literal. These are just numbers that God used for his purposes. I don't believe the earth is 1,656 years old at the time of the flood, nor do I believe that there was a worldwide flood. And the reference to earth there does not mean the entire earth. It just means the earth. I personally believe it's referring to when the Black Sea was flooded, before it was flooded, when the strait between near Istanbul, the land bridge busted, and then the water from the Mediterranean flooded the Black Sea. And there's evidence that that actually happened, and there was civilization at the bottom of the Black Sea. That's the evidence. And so anyway, that's personally what I believe, and it's not necessary that you believe in the 1,656 years between Adam and the flood. It's all, in my opinion, and it's clear to me, that it's all metaphorical. It's all for God's purposes. It has the myth is true. It's meaningfully true, not necessarily literally true. Okay, now, obviously the water slide hints at slipping and sliding, like I mentioned. Okay, and so that's why I suggested here was the deck of the ship flooded from the water slide. Probably it was, because you can see in the viral video of this, the water gushing out of the water slide onto the deck of the ship. And so that would make sense that we have this flood symbolism sign connect to the date that Paul Simon will fall with this flood symbolism number. Now, 1,656 hours is also 18.90%, which sits at 19%. The driver who fell is known for being only 19. So this connection again, this 19% connects to the fall of the 19-year-old. That's another second witness. By the way, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required, and this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. The day that Ace Frehley died, October 16th, is also 9 plus 11 days to November 5th. November 5th is 16.16% of a year, a calendar year, after the man jumped from the cruise ship in Puerto Rico with $16,000 on him. This was another cruise ship sign this occurred in early September. Continuation of the ship signs in the 8th month. By the way, 16 is 8 plus 8. But anyway, the media story was how he was also charged by U.S. Customs for not declaring the $16,000. So this is the number in the story. And we have this 16% of a calendar year connection. Now, as I said and explained in another video, Puerto Rico is extremely relevant to Paul Simon because he has a famous song, Born in Puerto Rico, that he composed and sang for his big Broadway musical, What's it called? It's called The Cape Man. By the way, just coincidentally, I paused the video at 1 minute and 15 seconds to find that. And that's again Paul Simon. That's a personal sign for myself, I suppose. But we are talking about the date 11:5 here and how it was relevant because of the date 1:15, which hints at Amos 1 with its 15 verses, as I explained earlier. Well, anyway, the Cape Man is known to be the biggest. God uses extremes and records and etc. For signs, and the Cape Man was the biggest flop in Broadway musical history. The Cape Man album, if I recall from memory, was Simon's 9th album, and the Cape Man lost $11 million of Paul Simon's money, which made it a 9/11 sign. And Paul Simon is symbolism for 9/11. He's from New York City, first of all. Second of all, his prophetic concert in Central Park in Manhattan. But also, importantly, he opened the first broadcast after 9/11 with the song The Boxer. And boxing is about knocking your opponent to the ground, and on 9/11, the towers were knocked and collapsed to the ground. Okay, so anyway, this is an amazing confirmation here, this connection to Puerto Rico because of the connection to Paul Simon. The Broadway musical is about a man convicted of murder who was Puerto Rican. And long story short, but it relates to Paul Simon. Paul Simon also has another very big hit, heavily influenced by Latin music, Late in the Evening, which incidentally was the prophetic last song performed at the prophetic reunion concert. But it's symbolism for the time being late for America to repent and come back to God. When Paul Simon dies, that will be symbolism that the period is over. That's the point. Paul Simon was a part of the beginning of this period of warning, of grace, last chance, with the 9/11 events. All right, and then Paul Simon is also, his death will be symbolism for the end of this period. And then now time is up, the transgression's limit has been exceeded, judgment is unavoidable. There's no more chance. That's what Paul Simon's death will symbolize. That's the whole big thing here. The 9/11 sign involving Paul Simon and his death will be the bookends, if you will, and that's why Paul Simon and Garfunkel's 4th album is Bookends, which contains the song America. That's another reason why Paul Simon is associated with the number 4. Incidentally, 16 is 4 times 4, and that's the point, actually. I forgot to mention it's not just 16 coincidence here. It's because 16 is 4 times 4, which also hints at the 44th president. But it's also, like I am saying, symbolism for Paul Simon, but also the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and by the way, Paul Simon is Jewish, is the symbol for a door. And that's what Porto, a port. A portal is the same as a door. And so that's why, another reason why it's 16,000 is because it's 4 times 4 in Puerto Rico. And the reason for all of this, incidentally, is because of the opening of the door that's unlocked with a key in one of the trumpet judgments that follows the sound of silence. Paul Simon was born in 41, and the word key is equal to 41 in simple English gematria. Also, music is known for its music keys in its composition. And Paul Simon is the GOAT, considered to be anyway, greatest of all time of pop music composition. And God uses goats for his signs. That's why Paul Simon, because he's a goat. And so, okay. And so also this, the demons that will come through the portal and the door that will be unlocked with the key will then proceed to demonically possess people for, as it says, 5 months, which is why Paul Simon is also associated with the number 5, as I mentioned earlier. They will be demonically possessed. Did I mention this earlier? I think I probably did. Yes. They will become demonically possessed through the 5G frequencies. But this is also in the 5th trumpet judgment. And that's why, again, Paul Simon's first line in the song Graceland, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. As I probably explained earlier, delta brainwaves will be what will facilitate the demonic possession triggered by the mark of the Antichrist, and what it delivers into people, the components that will reach their brain, act as transistors for the 5G frequencies. And that's why The Shining, because The Shining movie is about demonic possession, and it stars Shelley Duvall, who Paul Simon famously dated and then broke up with at the airport portal before she flew to the UK to film the movie. Starring Jack Nicholson, another reference to Nicolaitan, like Dallas, like I talked about. Okay, the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. God is also incidentally saying there that there will be quote unquote Christians that will be demonically possessed because they have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And the vast majority of quote unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing. And you know what I'm talking about, but nowhere in the Bible does it say one cannot repent after having taken the mark of the Antichrist. But it is a spiritual abomination. And it does not need an additional something to go with it, nor does it need an additional technology, or a false form of religious worship. In fact, for those who are wise, it did come with a false form of religious worship. And also it does not need a new age of supposed dispensation after supposedly all quote-unquote Christians will be quote-unquote will be raptured. There will be a rapture, but there's no dispensationalism. And that's a workaround solution to how the book of Revelation and the churches, the letters to the churches, contradict their doctrine. One of many, many abhorrent workaround solutions that the Reformed theologians and the Calvinists and the once saved, always saved people use to prop up their heretical doctrine that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war on. So yes, so if you don't know what I'm talking about, these people say that, well, this couldn't be the mark of the Antichrist because the rapture hasn't happened. Well, why do they believe this in the first place? Well, because the book of Revelation, the letters to the churches in the book of Revelation clearly talk about performing works, and Jesus is highly critical in grading their works. Well, according to their doctrine, works are irrelevant. That's why the typical evangelical has somewhat of a phobia regarding works. Because if they think that if they believe intellectually the imprecise doctrine, that they are in jeopardy of not being saved, because their salvation is dependent on intellectually agreeing precisely with the precise doctrine, which is absurd. And furthermore has nothing to do with the Apostles' Creed, which the early church believed. And if this is the case, well, heaven is going to be filled with a bunch of old white men, Calvinists. And but it is absurd, of course. And furthermore, every other page in the Bible flatly contradicts their doctrine. And anyway, so that's the dispensationalism for you. So they say that, well, there's this age of grace, and then after the rapture, then works become relevant. Those that are left behind will then have to perform with their works. That's what they say. Jesus hates this. And he's coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. And the works of this doctrine are exemplified by the modern evangelical church that is spiritually lazy. It is the do-nothing church, in large part. Maybe there are some people doing things like the so-called pastor, but they're doing the wrong things because there's no pastors. Jesus forbid this. And all the things that for example, the things that people do for their church, that's their ministry. I asked a young guy who was traveling around Europe, with his buddy, because in my mind, I don't understand that. Because a born-again Christian no longer is living, they've died the self. That's the meaning of being born again. As Jesus said, one needs to bear their cross and follow him. Where did he go? He went to his death. And also he said that one needs to be like a kernel of wheat going into the ground and then dying before it can then grow and produce fruit. Well, anyway, you meet all of these Christians in these so-called churches, and you find out what they do, and it's nothing most of the time. But then some guy like, typical, the guy who was traveling around Europe with his buddy having fun, so what's your ministry? And that question is like even a surprise in itself. Like, so he thinks about it. Well, okay, my ministry is I'm a drummer. I'm a drummer at my church. That's that's not good. That's not good enough. This guy's a young, capable guy. He can be doing much more than that. God wants us to be working to the bone and living out our faith. And we will be judged by our bags of gold. The thief on the cross that died right after coming to faith is the example they use for how one does not need to do works. But he had no bag of gold. The bags of gold represents one's abilities and opportunities, and we will be judged accordingly. And for example, the Christian, because that's the parable, it's addressed to Christians. The three are believers. The one that had the one bag of gold that did nothing with it, Jesus banished to hell. That was a Christian. That was a believer. That's a huge warning. And it comes in context, incidentally, of those who will be left behind, the sleeping bridesmaids, which are Christians. And because they're asleep and they're lazy and they think they're in need of nothing, they just listen to their pastor who tells them, don't worry about it. Make your own decision as to whether or not that thing was the mark of the Antichrist or not. Not bothering to take the time to listen to the other people with the Holy Spirit telling them that it was. And looking at the clear and easy, simple, clear evidence. And instead following the world and the world's media, which they should have known decades ago not to do, had they been interested in truth and righteousness, which is why they ultimately took the mark of the Antichrist, is because of that. It's judgment. If you were following the mainstream media, it was indicative of how you were not someone who was interested in truth and righteousness. And in the book of Ezekiel, we have the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist, and those who received the mark and therefore were saved were those who were crying out for justice and righteousness. And if you were following mainstream media and following a pastor and therefore following the world and living lives basically barely indistinguishable than other non-believers, maybe you go out once every 2 weeks with your church in a group of 50 to the park and start trying to talk to people. And that's your form of ministry. That's not good enough. That's not using your bag of gold. You're not. And so these people are living their lives like other non-believers. They're interested more in their families, their careers, their vacations, their retirements, their career, their jobs, etc. And God's like a little thing they do on the side once in a while. It's like a hobby group. They haven't died the self, and that's the test of faith. It's like the purpose of the end times is the testing of faith. There'll be more opportunity to come, and hopefully they will repent for having already taken the mark of the Antichrist. And, well, as we know, not all of the marks, not all of the things were the same. So some people are going to be demonically possessed from what they took, and some people won't be, I suppose. But it's good. There'll be another round of the thing, and there'll be more of a test. But the people that took it because, well, they wanted to keep their jobs. They wanted to, and some even took it just because they wanted to travel and go on a vacation. Massively unrighteous, because they should have known, and they do know that it was an abomination. I mean, the majority of these people even know that the thing industry in the development of their things use cells from unborn babies. That in itself. But also, by taking it, it fed the system. It fed the Antichrist beast and empowered it in order to compel other people to take it who didn't want to take it. And that also is why their taking it was unrighteous. It wasn't only what it did to their own body, which was insert snake venom into their chromosomes, snake venom DNA, but it also compelled other people to do it. Okay. So, back to what we were getting at. So this is why, incidentally, Paul Simon will die of a head injury, because it's pointing to the coming demonic possession of the people's brains that take the mark. And what's one reason, by the way, they took the mark? Well, to keep their jobs, hence the money sign here, the 16,000 that this guy wanted to keep, which is why he jumped off the ship. Oh, well, because he was in debt to the crews for gambling for 16,000 or something like that. Anyway, so this date, November 5th, the day Paul Simon is predicted to die from a head injury, is or will be 8 weeks and 1 day, which hints at Revelation 8:1, after the 67 containers, shipping containers, fell off the Portuguese ship named Mississippi in the port of Los Angeles, which means or is symbolic for, in God's signs, fallen angels that will come through the portal. So we have the port in Los Angeles. The ship's named Mississippi. It's a ship with a Portuguese flag, as in portal, and the port. A Portuguese flag and 67 containers. Well, why is this? Well, it was on the date 9/9, and 9/9 was 8 months and 1 day after the date 1/8, which also hints at Revelation 8:1. So we have a bunch of 8:1s here, right? Which hint at Revelation 8:1, which is Paul Simon, the sound of silence in heaven. So again, Paul Simon will die 8 weeks and 1 day after the ship sign, which was 8 months and 1 day after the date 1/8. Of course, by the way, Mississippi hints at Elvis and the head injury he received when? In 67. As I mentioned down here, because I forgot to do in this paragraph here, okay? So his head injury was in 67. The ship's name is Mississippi. Elvis was born in Mississippi, but his home and his mansion in Memphis is near the border of Mississippi, near where he was born. Anyway, this date that's pointed to here, from 9/9, and the number 9 is the most important number in God's signs, is from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. So we have 8 weeks and 1 day to 9/9, then 8 months and 1 day to the date 1/8, which was Elvis's 90th birthday, hence the connection to the date 9/9. And his 90th birthday was the day of the Palisades and Hollywood fires. And that's because Elvis was known for making these Hollywood movies. He made 31 of them. California and Hollywood is the 31st state. Again, Elvis is equal to or symbolic of Mississippi, which is why the Mississippi ship, 67 containers, because Elvis fell in 67. Okay, so the fires, in other words, were an Elvis and Paul Simon sign. And the fire, this date 1/8, by the way, was 7 days after the 7 + 7 deaths and the 7 injured in the attack with the truck on the date 1/1 on a Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., which I just mentioned. And then the 7 injured were in front of the Trump Hotel later that day with the Tesla, which is also symbolism for lightning because of electricity, but also Tesla was famous for his lightning experiments. And again, that was the day of the lightning strikes, as I explained earlier. So 7 days later, after the 7 + 7 deaths and the 7 injured, was this Elvis Day, which was these fires. But also the Palisades, that name is symbolic of a wall. And the Israelites, when they marched around the walls of security of Jericho, enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7. That's why it was 7 days after the 7 + 7 deaths. Because they marched around once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day, they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. That's why this is the 3 sets of 7 here. Okay. Now, the date 1/8. This Palisades and Hollywood fires Elvis sign on his 90th birthday. Oh, I just mentioned this. Okay, so I just went into that. Oh, also Elvis died in 77. Okay. Paul Simon's song Slip Sliding Away was released in 77. That was from his 4th solo album. It was 4 lightning strikes. And I already explained how 4 is associated with Paul Simon in God's signs. And also in 77, Paul Simon began the year by performing at Jimmy Carter's inaugural ball on the date 1/19, which hinted at 9/11. And again, Paul Simon is symbolism for 9/11 and America, which was the warning on 9/11 for America. The song he sang was American Tune. Okay, so yeah, Elvis fell in 67, like I said. The 67 containers fell off the ship named Mississippi. It's all amazing. It's so amazing. And the portal, it fell off the ship, the Portuguese ship in the port, because the demons will demonically possess people through their heads, their brains. That's why Elvis's brain was injured, which led to his death in 77. As I explained earlier, I think, from autoimmune diseases, which he used drugs to counter the effects of. But the drugs themselves, the pharmaceutical products, are also symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. Which will lead to demonic possession through people's brains. 4 lightning strikes on Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. hints at the Sound of Silence album, Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Therefore, all of this connects to 11:5. Because of the idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4 in the 1st chapter of Amos, which has 15 verses, as I explained earlier. Another thing is that on the day that Ace Frehley died, the Kiss musician, John Bolton was indicted, and Bolton is symbolism for lightning. If I recall, there is lightning symbolism in the imagery of the Kiss band. I think they, in their artwork or maybe on their faces, they paint lightning bolts. I could be wrong, though. Either way, Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. The word Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Barak in Hebrew means lightning. Bama in Hebrew means high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven, as for example, it is said that Lucifer fell from the high place. And in the Bible is also a euphemism for the false religious worship the Jews would conduct on the tops of mountains. And in the language Jesus would have spoke, Aramaic, the word for from is O. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And so it's time to stop playing the Antichrist guessing game that evangelicals love to play, because it's absurd, and God has overwhelmingly revealed the identity of the Antichrist through his overwhelming amount of prophetic signs, which the vast majority have been missed by the so-called watchers. Because, for one thing, they're playing the Antichrist guessing game, and they haven't accepted that Barack Obama is one of the Antichrists. And the thing is that God's prophetic signs, his big picture of signs, which is only being explained on this channel, is largely focused on Barack Obama. And the building blocks of the signs are Obama-related, like the number 44, for example. And if you can't appreciate that, you won't appreciate God's prophetic signs, his big picture of signs. And anyway, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, which these evangelicals claim to prove that the identity of the Antichrist is unknowable, their interpretation of that is false. Paul was not talking about the Holy Spirit, nor will the Holy Spirit be so-called removed, like completely from the world. Right? Paul was talking about, when he's referring to the he and the what as being in the way of the revealing of the Antichrist, Well, why did he talk about it as a he and a what if he was referring to the Holy Spirit? Second, why did he speak cryptically? And why did he tell the Thessalonians that they knew what he was talking about? And why speak cryptically if they knew? Well, the reason is because those in possession of the letter would have been in danger because he was referring to Rome and how the Emperor Constantine moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople. That's the he and the what. Thus paving the way for the rise of the power of the bishops of Rome, which led to the first pope and is the predecessor of the Antichrist. In other words, the identity of the Antichrist was revealed a long time ago, centuries ago. And of course, it was always going to be that the Antichrist would be a pope. The reformers knew this, but this information has been conveniently lost right before the end times. And now people don't remember the reason for the Reformation, which was one big reason, recognition that the Pope is the Antichrist. But of course he is. He presents himself as a Christian. Because Catholicism isn't Christianity. That's not to say that there aren't Christians that are Catholic. There will be Catholics who will be saved, but it will be in spite of their Catholicism, not because of it. Anyway, that's another subject which I repeat over and over and over. So let's move on. Ace Frehley fell on September 25th, 2025, the 144th semi-prime number of months after the release of the Graceland album on August 25th, 86. 144 is a number that symbolizes those who will be experiencing grace, if you will, when they are raptured in Bible prophecy. And so that's why Graceland connects with this number 144 to the day that Ace Frehley fell. There's other signs, though, on this date that are part of this, that confirm all of this. But anyway, Ace fell on September 25th, exactly 131 weeks after Tom Brady announced that he had attained part ownership of the Aces women's basketball team that play in Mandalay Bay Hotel in Las Vegas. And that day was 1,999 days after the mass murder shooting by the shooter positioned in the Mandalay Bay who shot at people in the Route 91 music festival across the way. The Route 91 music festival is a confirmation of this 1,999 days, but also Tom Brady, the biggest thing about Tom Brady and the story of Tom Brady is how he was never supposed to be a starting quarterback, and then he became the GOAT, the greatest of all time. He almost was not even drafted in the NFL draft. He was drafted 199th, second to last. And that's why we have this 1,999 days connection between these two Mandalay Bay signs when Tom Brady announced that he had acquired ownership of the Aces who play in the Mandalay Bay. Now, Aces is a term for a sharpshooter, an ace. I think it arose during World War I when the pilots would shoot down other planes. They would call them ace pilots. But a sharpshooter or a sniper will also be termed an ace, okay? So that's the reference for aces. But in terms of basketball, in context of basketball, it's referring to basketball shots on the net. That's why they would name their team the Aces, because it's about shots, just like sharpshooting is. But all of this, basketball shots and sharpshooting shots, and the shooter from the Mandalay Bay, mass shootings in God's signs are symbolism for the mark that is the SHOT, the mark of the Antichrist, which gives a person blood disease, and G131 in the Greek Strong's Concordance is the word for blood disease, which is the reason for the exact 131 weeks connection between the falling of Ace Frehley and the announcement of Tom Brady, the GOAT, that he had acquired the aces in the Mandalay Bay. By the way, it's in the 36th state, and 36 is 6 times 6, but also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number, triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. So that's more symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, because in Bible prophecy, the mark is related or associated with the number 666. That's why it's in this 36th state. And 36 also hints at 3 6s. This is amazing. Do you see this? This is amazing. But also Tom Brady, who is the GOAT, is symbolism for blood too, because of him becoming the GOAT when he won his 7th Super Bowl in his 10th Super Bowl appearance. Goats were used in ancient Israel on the Temple Mount on the Day of Atonement, the 10th day of the 7th month, in a blood ritual sacrifice. The Day of Atonement is the day on which the Antichrist will be defeated on the Temple Mount at the return of Lord Jesus Christ. And of course, the murdering of it was the deadliest, bloodiest, if you will, mass murder in history, symbolism of the mass taking of the mark of the Antichrist, because the things that come out of guns and go into people are symbolism for the things that come out of things and go into people. That's the reason for the name Ace. Now, his name is Frehley. That arguably hints at fell. But anyway, that just came to me, by the way. So Ace fell 15 days before the Aces won this year. The Aces won the WNBA championship. By the way, professional women's sports is a sin. Competitive women's sports is a sin. That's the truth. And people know this. Everyone knows this deep down. This is a thing. Men compete in sports. It's a competitive. Men are competitive, and there's a good reason for this. It's a masculine thing, and there's a reason why God created 2 genders, to not be confused with each other. And women were not made to compete in sports. They can do sports, but not competitively. So the WNBA is a sin, and Las Vegas is Sin City. And the Aces that God is using here play in Las Vegas, in the location of this deadliest shooting in history. Do you still think that the WNBA is not a sin? Of course it is. And it's using Tom Brady, the GOAT, which sits at the Day of Atonement, and the Antichrist. So this should be enough proof. Everyone knows this unconsciously, if they haven't been, the culture hasn't conditioned them to believe something that isn't true. But it is a sin. And this Aces WNBA sign proves this. Okay, so I humbly recommend that if you are a woman who does competitive sports, you should rethink about what you are doing. It is a sin. It is an abomination. It is a form of an abomination. Now, Ace fell. This singer Ace fell 15 days before the women's basketball team named Aces won the championship. Ace died 15 days before October 31st, the date it's predicted Paul Simon will die, which, by the way, that in itself, the date October 31st, hints at G131, the word for blood disease, which is what one gets after taking the mark, and the mark gives the person the things into their brain, which is why Paul Simon will have a head injury on the state. Okay, now 7 Psalms is Simon's 15th solo album. Aces won their 3rd title. 15 divided by 3 equals 5, which hints at the 5th trumpet of 7 trumpets. And hence the 7 Psalms. And Graceland is Paul Simon's 7th solo album. But it's the 5th trumpet in which the demonic possession is described. Now, 15 is the 6th semi-prime number, a number that is only divisible by 2 other prime numbers. And Ace died 6 days after Aces won the championship in the 6 times 6th state, which is at 666. So I wrote wow because of this next discovery here. Tom Brady announced ownership of the Aces on March 23, 2023, exactly 13 years after Obama signed Obamacare, the thing his presidency was most known for, nationalized health care, and 13 years hints at Revelation 13, which describes the Antichrist, the 2 Antichrists, Pope Francis and Barack Obama, in that order, and also describes the mark of the Antichrist, which will be enforced through nationalized health care, which is why the Antichrist's presidency was known for his nationalized health care, because he will be enforcing the mark of the Antichrist. Well, anyway, that's why it's very relevant that Brady announced ownership of the Aces, which connected to the mass shooting, as I just said, which is, as I explained, symbolism for the shots that will be the mark of the that are the mark of the Antichrist that will be enforced through nationalized health care. Also on the day Okay, so next paragraph here. Okay, so we got the 13 years connection. Now Brady, the 199th selected, that's the biggest thing he's known for, announced ownership of Aces on March 23, 2023, which again was 1,999 days after the Day of Atonement. Oh, and by the way, that was the Day of Atonement. I forgot to mention that. So Brady, like I said, is symbolism for the Day of Atonement because he won 7 out of 10 Super Bowls. And this connects with this number that symbolizes Tom Brady to the Day of Atonement and the shooting at the Mandalay Bay. By the way, that shooting in 2017 was a symbolic 7 years before the 7+7 deaths in the lightning strikes day attack in New Orleans that I explained earlier began the symbolic final 7 years, because it's a 7+7 years in terms of symbolism, which mirrors the 7+7 years in the king's dream in Egypt that Joseph interpreted. Okay, so back to what I was saying here, though. Again, we have Brady, the 199th selected, announcing his ownership of Aces on this date, which was 1,999 days after the Day of Atonement and the shooting from the Mandalay Bay on the 32nd floor. The 32nd prime number is 131. And again, we go back here. The announcement of Brady was 131 weeks exactly to the day Ace fell. When Brady announced the ownership of Aces, 131 weeks exactly to the day that Ace fell. That's why this is all wow, okay? Now, again, the shooting in the Mandalay Bay, though, was from the 32nd floor. And 32, the 32nd prime number is 131. It's also equal to the name Obama in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. Because Obama will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, shots, and that's what happened from the 32nd floor. Until he was confronted by a man named Jesus, which is Jesus confronting the Antichrist. Now, and again, that was at the beginning. That was a symbolic 7 years. It's all amazing. Now, so this is March 23rd, 2023 date, again, was 131 weeks exactly before Ace fell. The goat was a blood sacrifice on atonement, which was the 10th day of the 7th month. Brady announced ownership of Aces exactly 115 weeks after he became the goat with his 7th Super Bowl win in 10 Super Bowl appearances. Again, it's 115 weeks since that Amos 1 with its 15 verses, which is so relevant to Paul Simon because of the idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4. The goat was hit on the head in the sacrifice, by the way. That just came to me right now. This always happens. New stuff comes to me. So the goat was hit in the head in the sacrifice in ancient Israel. Paul Simon is predicted to die from a head injury. And this connects with 115 weeks. Paul Simon announcing his ownership of aces to his goat. He became the GOAT, undisputed, with his 7th Super Bowl win and 10 Super Bowl appearances. Wow. You know what, too, by the way? That was the win in Tampa Bay, TB, and Tom Brady's initials is TB. But it was the... never mind. Never mind. Okay. Well, the letter T is the 20th letter, and B is the 2nd letter, so that hints at 22. And the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by the number 22 in God's prophetic signs. Because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist would have been described in the book of Ezekiel, which would have been a Tav mark, which is the last and 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last and 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. And the mark of the Antichrist changes a person's chromosomes, and chromosomes have 2 arms, and they come in pairs, and that's 2 and 2. That's why God does this, and so that's why and by the way, that Super Bowl was played during the CVD disease. The stadium wasn't filled to capacity because of that. That's another thing. Also, Tom Brady won Super Bowls with 2 different teams. That's another 2 for you. Anyway, so that Super Bowl, by the way, was also played by Tampa Bay in the Tampa Bay Stadium. It was the first of 2 Super Bowls in a row, the only 2 in history, in which the winning team of the Super Bowl was playing in their home stadium. The other one was the following year in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles hints at fallen angels, who will come and demonically possess people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, symbolized by the number 22. Okay, so hopefully that hit you as hard as it hit me. That's why it's a big wow. Okay, again, Tom Brady, it's all about this announcing of the ownership of the aces and it connecting to the Day of Atonement, the shooting, but also it connecting to when Tom Brady became the GOAT, which was symbolic of the Day of Atonement because it was 7 Super Bowls and 10 Super Bowl appearances, and it connects with 115 weeks, which hints at Amos 1 with its 15 verses. Which makes this connected to Paul Simon again, because again, Tom Brady announced 131 weeks before the ace guy fell. The ace guy, okay? He announced the ownership of aces 131 weeks exactly before ace fell. Okay. Now, November 5th, for 3 transgressions and for 4. That's the day Paul Simon will die again. That's why the 115 weeks connection here. Aces won the championship. The Aces won the championship this year 3 times in the last 4 seasons. That's solid confirmation of everything here. That's solid confirmation of the 115 weeks, for example, because of the idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4 in Amos 1 with its 15 verses. The Aces won the championship 3 of the last 4 seasons this year. And we just talked about how the Ace championship connected to the Ace with the 15 days. The day the Ace fell. And the Aces won their 3rd title. Okay. And Ace died 15 days before Paul Simon's predicted to die of a head injury, which is all the shots and the shooting into Mandalay Bay. You get it. It's a circular picture, right? It's all 3-dimensional, right? Hopefully that's I've made it easy to understand here, though. November 5th is 41 days, or 11.23% of a year, after ACE fell on September 25th, 2025, which was 144th semi-prime number of months after the release of Graceland. Simon was born in 41. Key equals 41 in simple English gematria. 1123 is the 188th prime number, and H188 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word for woe, exclamation mark, used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. And the first woe of these in the prophecy of the Revelation is regarding the demonic possession of people after the key opens the bottomless pit to the fallen angels. Okay. Did you get all that? No. November 5th, 2025 is 810% of a year after October 1st, 2017, the day of the shooting on the Day of Atonement. Paul Simon's death will hint at Revelation 8:1, the sound of silence. In other words, there will be a relative period of silence after Simon's death before the 7 trumpets begin on the world and America, the 7 trumpets of judgment. Paul Simon's death, in other words, will symbolize or signal that the 7 trumpets of judgment are about to commence. And there will be a period of silence followed by lightning. That's how it is in the prophecy anyway. That's why the lightning signs, by the way, on the first day of the year here, on a Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. So anyway, this 810% hints at Revelation 8:1. Paul Simon his death will point to Revelation 8:1. He's predicted to die on this date, which is 810% of a year after this shooting at the Mandalay Bay from the 32nd floor, which hints at the 32nd prime number, 131, which hints at G131, blood disease, which is what a person gets after taking the mark and the shooting. And the things go to their heads, the components, which will facilitate demonic possession. Aces lost their first 2 finals and won their last 3 finals, which hints at 23, which hints at the basketball president who wore jersey number 23. The Aces are a basketball team, and they play in Sin City, and women in competitive sports is sinful, and the man of sin, one of the Antichrist's title, is number 23 in basketball. Simpson, number 32, an inverse of 23, was released in Las Vegas from jail on the same day as the shooting, the deadliest shooting in history, from the 32nd floor in Las Vegas. On the attendees at Route 91 festival, and A.C. Cowlings drove Simpson down Highway 91. And by the way, Simpson was known for murder. And that's why he released on the biggest, deadliest murder day in U.S. history, the biggest mass shooting murder day. But what's interesting is this connection also with O.J. Simpson, because he's known for the car chase down the highways of California, including Route 91 or Highway 91. But the shooter shot from the 32nd floor the day that number 32 was released at the Route 91 Music Festival. Okay, so now we've gotten to a connection to Ace Cowlings, the guy who infamously drove Simpson in the white Bronco pickup truck, or truck. So Ace, which is at shots, as I explained, basketball shots or sharpshooting, etc., died the 22nd prime number of weeks after news of Simpson's death, which was 5 weeks after the plane wheel fell off of the Hertz rental car parking lot at the airport on its way to Japan. There's so much in here. Again, 22 symbolizes the mark. Shots symbolize the mark. Okay, A.J. Simpson's known for the murder. He died 5 weeks exactly after the wheel fell on the Hertz. That's because 5G frequency Hertz will facilitate the demonic possession, and God is using Japan in his signs because of Japanimation, which is obsessed with obsession of people. and spiritual obsession. Which is obsessed with the possession of people, of people's bodies and souls. That's Japanese animation for you. That's one reason why God uses Japan in his signs. So that's why the exact 5 weeks. And also, Simpson was known more than his football career for his Hertz commercials. That's why Simpson died exactly 5 weeks after the plane dropped its wheel on the Hertz parking lot at the airport, as in portal the fallen angels will pass through and then demonically possess people, which is why the plane was on its way to Japan from the airport. And that's why Ace died 22nd prime number of weeks after Simpson's death. This hints at how Simpson drove with AC, which hints at Ace. This confirms it. The 22 is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, and so is O.J. Simpson's, as I've now explained. O.J. Simpson is known for the bloody glove. It's all about the blood and the trial and all that, right? Well, that's what the mark of the Antichrist does. It goes into people's blood, and it poisons their blood, which brings the components to the brain. Okay, this is an amazing thing here. Now, and again, don't forget, the guy Ace is a Kiss musician, which, by the way, is frequencies, music frequencies, hence the 5G frequencies connection to the Hertz rental car. But also, the Kiss musicians painted themselves up like demons who will come and demonically possess people. Okay, now, the actor Malcolm Jamal Warner, the famous actor from The Cosby Show, recently died, and he played A.C. Cowlings in the movie. I think it was a TV movie, made for TV, I think. But he died on July 20th this year, which is 88 days before Ace Frehley died. Ace Frehley is equal to 88 in Simple English Gematria. The name Ace is equal to 54 in English Gematria, and Warner died at the age of 54. So clearly, the prophetic significance of Malcolm Jamal Warner's death, there was more to this, but the big reason for it is how he symbolizes A.C. Cowlings in order to connect to O.J. Simpson and the mark of the Antichrist, and how this all connects to Ace Frehley. Because Ace Frehley equals 88, Warner died at 54, and Ace Frehley connects to the death of Simpson. His death connects to Simpson with the number 22. You see how it's all astounding. Now, okay, so on October 16th, the day Ace Frehley died, it was reported that J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, had won $1.4 million playing blackjack in Las Vegas. So we've got all these connections to Las Vegas through the Aces basketball team and O.J. Simpson being released in Las Vegas on the day of the deadliest shooting in history, which was also in Las Vegas, etc. We have this governor on the day that Ace Frehley died in the news for having won a jackpot for playing blackjack in Las Vegas. In blackjack, 21 is an ace card and a card with a value of 10. That's how you get 21 in blackjack, and that's when you have blackjack. Okay, now October 16th is 21 days after Ace Frehley fell and 21 days before Simon's predicted death on November 5th. That is amazing, because again, on this date, we had the blackjack in the news at Las Vegas. Now, there's more to confirm all of this, though, because Jason Aldean was the performer at the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival in Las Vegas during the shooting, and he has famously a tattoo of an ace and a jack of spades, a card valued at 10, I believe, on his shoulder. Jason has ace in the name phonetically. So, and Las Vegas blackjack, right? That's where you play blackjack. Now, Malcolm Jamal Warner played A.C. Cowlings. He died on July 20th, 88 days before Ace Frehley died. Okay, just repeating what I already wrote. Now, Ace fell 4 times 4 days after the containers fell in the port of Los Angeles, off of the Portuguese ship, and port equals door equals 4, as I explained. And it's Los Angeles, fallen angels. Ace fell 4 times 4 days after the containers fell. Right? And they fell off the Portuguese ship in the port of fallen angels. Hence the 4. On October 13th, Paul Simon's birthday, Jack Black, the famous actor, supported Naomi Watts at her Walk of Fame ceremony. Jack Black and Naomi Watts were in the movie King Kong together. Jack Black hints at blackjack. Watts hints at lightning and O.J. Simpson. Because the journalist that covered the trial extensively, her name was Rolanda Watts. She was the one that covered it. I think she had exclusive permission to cover the trial, from what I recall. But she's associated with the trial, which is the big thing about O.J. Simpson. The warrant for Simpson's arrest was issued at 11 a.m., and he was arrested outside of his mansion at 9 p.m. Malcolm Jamal Warner played A.C. Cowlings. He died on July 20th, 88 days before Ace Frehley died. Ace Frehley equals 88. He died at 54. Ace equals 54. Ace died 9 plus 11 days before Simon's predicted death. So you see there, Simpson. Whoa, wait a second. Simpson hints at Simon. Wow. I did know that already, I think, because Simpson died on the day that Paul Simon performed at the White House mansion, which I'm about to explain right here. And so I think I recognized that, a long time ago, but forgot. Well, anyway, so Simpson is associated with 9/11 because the warrant was issued at 11 a.m. and he was arrested later in the day, as we all know, famously because of the car chase, at 9 p.m. in front of his mansion, which is relevant, as I'll explain. Now, Malcolm Jamal Warner is being used to symbolize Simpson through A.C. Cowlings, and he died 88 days before Ace died. A.C. Cowlings, Ace, right? Okay, and then Ace died 9 plus 11 days before Simon's predicted death on November 5th. So that's how this is all it all connects. Now, Simon will die, or predicted to die, on November 5th, exactly 82 weeks after Simpson died, when Simon was 82 years old, on the day that Simon performed at the White House. Simon sang at the Graceland Mansion, at the White House Mansion, and Simpson was arrested in front of his mansion. Infamously. Ace hints at Grace, as in Graceland. Ace Ventura, the movie, was released the 44th semi-prime number of days before Game 4 of the NBA Finals was interrupted by A.C. Cowlings and Simpson when they drove down Highway 91. The 44th semi-prime number is 133. Okay, and this is 133 days is also 19 weeks. So in other words, the movie Ace Ventura connects to A.C. Cowlings with exactly 19 weeks, which is the 44th semi-prime number. which hints at the Antichrist, the 44th president. But this is also confirmed to be true because the car chase infamously interrupted Game 4 of the NBA Finals. I mean, the network that was broadcasting Game 4 of the NBA Finals actually went away from the game and broadcast instead the car chase. And so this was all a parallel too with the interruption of Game 3 of the 1989 World Series due to an earthquake in San Francisco, where O.J. Simpson is from. But that's another subject. But it all connects. It's all interconnected, right? It's all a big picture. But 19 hints at 9/11. And again, Simpson is associated with 9/11, as is Simon, as I explained earlier. But I wanted to just point out here that the movie Ace Ventura connects to A.C. Cowlings, because it's 19 weeks to the warrant at 11 a.m. and the rest at 9 p.m. So, okay, Ace Ventura, released on February 4th, 94, was exactly 390 weeks after the birth of the Antichrist. This is prophetic in the Bible because of Ezekiel chapter 4 and the period of time of 390 days in terms of judgment for ancient Israel. But also, G390 in the Greek concordance is the word for return. The Apostle James used it in quoting Amos 9:11, which regards the return of the Lord to rebuild his temple. So what is the meaning of this? Well, 39 equals 13 plus 13 plus 13. And Revelation 13 equals the shots equals ace. Okay, so Ace Ventura is 1 hour and 26 minutes long. And the number of days in Bible prophecy that symbolizes the period of the Antichrist is 1,260 days. The Miami Dolphins, which is a big part of the plot of the movie Ace Ventura, is in God's signs, and we know this even before this discovery of the movie, symbolism for the sun's corona, because the logo of the Dolphins is a sun, but specifically it's the sun's corona, which hints at coronavirus, which hints at the SHOTs, which were used to murder people, which connects to O.J. Simpson, which is why Ace Ventura connects to the O.J. Simpson Day in A.C. Cowlings, Ace Ventura. And again, it connects through 9/11 symbolism and the 44th semi-prime number of days, which hints at the 44th president who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. It's amazing. The Dolphins quarterback currently is Hawaiian, and so is the Antichrist. Well, he grew up in Hawaii anyway. Is known for the serious concussions he had that many say should have ended his career. Okay, so the current Miami Dolphins quarterback is known for head injuries. And again, this is connecting to Paul Simon's predicted death from a head injury. Ace Ventura cost $15 million. Ace died 15 days before October 31st. 7 Psalms is Simon's 15th solo album. Kiss equals 199 in Hebrew gematria and 58 in simple English gematria. Brady was selected 199th. 58 people were shot and killed from the Mandalay Bay Hotel, where the Aces play. And Ace founded Kiss. Ace Frehley, who fell and then died, started a band named Frehley's Comet. Simon is predicted to fall the day after the comet and third interstellar object will reach perihelion with the sun. Ace Ventura equals Miami Dolphins equals sun's corona. So Paul Simon is predicted to fall. Incidentally, I'll repeat that. The day after this comet sign. And yeah, I talked earlier about August 30th too. And that being the day of another sign in the night sky with the conjunction of Venus and the M44 Beehive star cluster. So that's another reason why, for example, we know that the Beehive star cluster conjunction was in fact a Paul Simon related sign, for one thing. But ultimately, the third interstellar object is a rock in space, and it's a rock that will hit Earth that's described in Revelation chapter 8, which the death of Paul Simon will point to because of Revelation 8:1 and the sound of silence in heaven. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.